Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
So, Reid, today we're testing a new software that records video. So that's what you were just saying is like there's a countdown timer that counts down from 5. Because when we used to try to do video, I would have to splice it by doing like a hand movie clap between. So I don't have to do that anymore. But I like how, since we're testing video for, I'll say the first official time, because the other times were kind of hacky. I like that it looks like you got your haircut done high and tight for this one. Like, did you finally go back out? Did you stop doing this yourself?
Yeah, I did. Miranda's like, enough's enough. The Uncle Fester was not doing it for her. I won't say literally, but it was just like these wings that were popping out, like from or is it Herman Munster? Anyways, so she was like, something's got to be done, and I don't want you to just shave it all again, even if you are losing your hair. So I was like, all right. So I went back to the barber and I was like, what's the game plan here? It's been almost 4 years since I've been in the chair, and things aren't any better. And she was just like, oh, shut up. Let me just, do a high and tight. It'll look good. And that's what she did. So
Was this the same barber that you used to have trouble getting scheduled with? That was so busy?
yeah, I think so. It's funny because when I first started seeing her, she was like, had just graduated past whatever, the assistant level, and was just getting her own clients. So I was one of the early ones, and I was paying like 20 to 30 bucks. And I think that's pretty good for a decent salon. I was like, hey, this works. And so she like grandfathered me in, and that's where I screwed up, because I should have like kept seeing her every like, I don't know, 6 months or something. But she thought basically I died or moved like to another country. So I was like, does Alex still work there? Like, yeah, sure. And I booked the appointment, and yeah, everything's cool. Right. And but I walk up and she's like, here's my assistant, Megan. I was like, oh boy,
Oh man.
you have an assistant now. I don't think it's going to be 20, 30 bucks. Sure enough, it's $50 for this haircut. I was like, that's ridiculous. I'll see you in another 4.5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you have less hair now, but they charge you more for it. Versus
Right.
on my side, they should
That's not right.
upcharge me because I got a hell of a mop that they got to deal with. Yeah.
Totally, man.
Well, it's funny because I was just asking Nicole this weekend if she was going to bust out the YouTube. One of the top YouTube searches this last year was how to cut men's haircut at home or something. Or sorry, yeah. And so I was like, it's about time that you take another swing at it because it's getting real bad. And it's such a thing to like schedule it and go all the way down to town, and then with the COVID stuff. So I feel like anybody can only see that I can flop it over the top, and thus the rest doesn't matter. The back, the sides, it just needs to be, as you said, doesn't just, as long as it doesn't stick out, we're cool.
Yeah, that is more or less it. Funny you mentioned like Bear touched on the experience of going in for a haircut these days. So I don't know when the last one you did, if they had the kind of Dexter like setup, but when you go back to but I walked in and there was like these, I mean, it looked like I was on set, with the show, where there was like these huge divide, like plastic between each sink and all that. It was super, super weird.
I haven't done that, but I do have to wear the mask the whole time, which makes it hard fitting which mask you have to get around the ear. I feel like when you get there, they should, or before you get there, when you schedule it, they should say, we really recommend you get a mask with like a really thin band. Right. It's going to be a mess. Or they just hand them out. Like maybe that you just have to upcharge people for the mask now. But
yeah, totally.
Well, on this episode, we're talking about antitrust, kind of the Facebook, Google, Amazon, some co-star stuff. But Reid, I thought it was a pretty good episode just to kind of get our initial thoughts on all these lawsuits that are hitting. But I didn't ask you one thing in the episode because I wanted to ask you, besides those 4 that I just rattled off, which tech company, or maybe not even tech company, but which company would you like to see something done against that isn't named? So is there somebody out of the main tech giants? Because you mentioned FANG during the episode, which is, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. Do you think Netflix needs any whopping? Do you Apple? I mean, is there anybody that's basically not under fire right now that you would say maybe we should take a closer look at?
Huh. Well, I guess Apple would be the easiest answer to that, but my feelings about Apple versus all the others that we cover in the like they're all kind of the same. Like um not meaning that that I'm apathetic to what's going on, because I'm not, but it's just the same kind of situation. So it's easy to group them in, right? But I would actually say Salesforce. Although, you've pointed out many times there is the ability to integrate with them. There's also remarkable headaches involved with that. But it seems to me that they're well on their way, if they're not already there, to a lot of anti-competitive like behavior within the CRM world.
But Reid, they believe in the Hawaiian spirit. They couldn't possibly be so evil. They got
make me keep thinking.
Yeah, they actually got hit last year with like people were really upset about them appropriating like the Hawaiian culture, which I feel like that's a whole different topic. But I just mean like they try to have that really carefree happiness attitude. But it's funny, I didn't actually think you were going to pick Salesforce, but that was kind of on my brain. I feel like they're the ones that are getting away scot free right now. Like all of these other, yeah, I know. They did, and it's like seems like it's going to get approved. And so it's like they just get to sit on the sidelines being like, oh, woe is me, Microsoft, so big. Oh, whatever, Apple, Google. And yet they're like just about as giant as many of these other ones. They're just kind of doing it pretty on the sideline.
I guess so, but maybe like you said, you were talking about opening up the social graph, just the fact that they, have such a robust app store and so many companies integrating that they look that, the optics just look better. But that won't last forever, especially with an acquisition as big as Slack. I mean, what would be really fascinating, because you had mentioned what would have been way cooler is if it was Slack and Zoom, but what if they pick off Slack, and then 3 years from now we're reading about them going after Zoom? That might that might be the tipping point,
Yeah. Well, depending again how they handle it. Like you can be big, you just can't be anti-competitive. So they are kind of like
the two often go hand in hand,
yeah.
seemingly, right?
Yeah. No, they often do. So I think Salesforce is protected a little bit because like Microsoft Teams is taking off so much, and Microsoft Teams is taking off because when you talk to the enterprise B2B like IT guy, chief information officer, CIO or whatever, or the security officer, it's like, hey, don't you want everything in one stack? Do you really want to use a different Slack and then you want to use Zoom? It's like, this is less secure. And so I think because Microsoft has that ability right now, it kind of buys Salesforce some shade. I'm with you on Apple though. I think Apple would be one because of the App Store. We talk about a little bit of this in the episode, like the fees there and how they don't allow other app stores like without like voiding your warranty. That to me is anti-competitive. I think Netflix is protected right now because Disney is coming so hard. Disney I think announced that they were going to do like 11 or 12 billion dollars in content, whereas everyone was shocked about Netflix spending 9 billion. Disney's like, cool story, I'm going to do 12 billion. So I think they're protected by that. And then what was that new announcement that just happened where it's like all the movies from like one of the major films like Wonder Woman is all going to be on HBO Max or whatever. So I feel like that announcement, Warner Brothers, all the Warner Brothers movies are going to be under the same streaming service too. So I feel like that buys like basically, all right, Netflix is cool, there's a lot of competition. But yeah, those are mine.
Who did you say owns or bought IMBD?
Oh, Amazon.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking, like, as you're talking through the content and the whole streaming thing, that that's been another one that was a bit of a surprise to me. Like, it just seemed like it happened overnight in the last year. I was like, what, IMBD now? Because whenever I'm looking, to search something, it's like, what other ways can you purchase this? And instead of like the 2 or 3 like usual suspects, now there's like 8 different streaming services that you can buy buy the content through.
Yeah, I think they've owned them for a while. Amazon has, but I do feel like sometimes the search results are in question to me, because whenever I look up a movie or a show, I immediately go there. Nicole actually searches by Google, and I chastise her for it. I'm like, why are you looking up this like film history on Google. Don't you know to use IMDb? But yesterday I was trying to search the new Netflix movie. Meryl Streep did a musical called Prom. I don't know if you've seen that come up, but it was a Broadway play converted to Netflix.
No, but when you said the word musical, I checked out right there.
But I thought Meryl Streep might hook you back in.
Possibly it would take that level of star power.
Yeah.
I think that the one I was excited about years ago, God, was it called Nine or something? It was with Daniel Day-Lewis. And they just had amazing star power, maybe Charlize Theron, I don't know. And it was horrible, you know. So that was the last time I really gave musical a shot.
Well, I do like musicals, but we can go do that a different time. But
I didn't know that.
I was going to make a joke this morning, but I knew you wouldn't have seen it. But you didn't end up watching Hamilton, right?
No, I really do want to see that. I've heard enough, and I love the Book of Mormon. You know, but that's like it's almost like baseball for a lot of people. If you put me like there in the in the theater or whatever, and I watch like a Broadway musical, like I can dig it. But if you have me watching that at home as a movie, it doesn't work for me. So I think it'd probably be the same way with Hamilton, but I don't know.
Hamilton, it was built up so much that the first time I saw it, it was kind of like what we talk about, like Wall Street 2. It was like, all right, well, it's fine. But as I watched it a second time, like that's how I got that running in this weekend, as I put on Hamilton and I went through the first intermission. I was like, all right, the second time around, I'm like, this is really good. But Prom does not hit that. You can go ahead and skip that Streep, and I'm a big Streep fan. But my point, bringing this back, I tried to search Prom on IMDb, and it's a Netflix movie. Did not show up in the IMDb results. Like when I went through the regular search history, I had to go to Google, and from Google I could get to the Prom page on IMDb to then look up Streep. And I was like, this is effed up. Like this movie just hit. It's the front page of Netflix. It's, got a bunch of big actors in it, and now it's getting suppressed in the results. And it's like when the name of the film is Prom, and you're bringing up other stuff that don't relate to that exact search, and it's like something's either your search is really that bad, or there's something funky going on here with Prime versus Netflix.
Yeah, totally. That is very suspicious.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's our intro, Reid. Should people stay tuned and hear the rest of this thing?
Yeah, it starts with haircuts, then moves to movies, then we get to the antitrust stuff.
Yeah, at some point there's some news in there. All right. Yeah. Well, check in, stay tuned, whatever. Listen on. Reid was just saying the countdown that this new software has made him feel like you're at Sears Photo. Where did you take your family photos? Was it Sears?
No, it was in the comfort of my living room.
Well, no, now, right? But no, I mean, as a child, did you guys ever do the Sears Photo?
I think so. Like, I feel like my grandparents dragged the rest of the family there, like for some sort of reunion. But I think my mom, splurged, at least in my teens. I feel like she would find some like freelancer and we'd go out to like the golf course or something and take a picture.
Well, fancy.
Even though none of us golf, just a pretty background.
Yeah. Well, we did the Sears Photo. I don't know that we did a family photo after the age of like 10. But prior to that, I remember like my mother dressing me up in overalls, the same overalls my grandfather had, and taking us to Sears. And so he and I could take the same like coverall photo. I must have been like 4, 5, I don't know. And then my sister, I don't know if you've seen this. Did you see this photo when we did the baby photo from work, but where I'm dressed up as Hansel and Gretel? Or I'm Hansel and my sister's Gretel?
No, I will definitely make a beeline for that next time I'm in the office.
Yeah, I'll share it with you afterwards. It's a classic. And I remember like my mom had me keep that outfit like into my teens. I bet she still has it. And it's like one of those things, like, what am I going to do with this outfit, as if I would subject my child, when I have a child, to wear this
right.
embarrassing thing.
Pay the torture forward.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyways, we're here to talk about Facebook antitrust, Google antitrust, and possibly some Amazon and CoStar stuff. So Should we start with Facebook, since that I feel like that's the one getting most of the headlines?
Yeah, we can. I think, we've scratched the surface of this in one or two podcasts. And then more recently, I guess we focused on the apartments.com and RentPath. But I'm just saying that up front, that what I'm more curious about is, I'll say, the trend. And I was just saying this to you before we started, but, what connects these, are they not as connected as we think they are? But it does seem like it's almost like a rash, of these, like, in the last few months. And what's really behind it, and what would the outcome be if some of these companies were broken up a little bit, which it's just a segue, I guess, more directly to Facebook, because that's some of what we've read, is that, the goal is potentially to break down, like, the acquisition that happened with WhatsApp and Instagram. So yeah,
Yeah, well, how
let's
do you
jump into it.
feel, I guess, generally speaking, about the timing? How do you feel about the timing? Do you think it's related at all? I mean, you're more involved in politics than I am. Is it related at all to it? Because it almost seems like this kind of thing would happen at the beginning of changing leaderships, not like at the end of like the presidential election. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think it's related. I don't think the big techs are probably super enthusiastic about Biden, but on the other hand, a lot of what I'm reading and people did predict is that he's going to be way more moderate, if not borderline centrist, with his administration. And that, I think, surprises a lot of people. It certainly doesn't support the, kind of, not conspiracy, but like the fear mongering that the Trump campaign and administration was putting out there, like, oh, Biden's going to turn the country socialist. That's not been the case at all. And I'm not, this isn't about me supporting Biden. It's just, he's all about unity. And so he thinks the only way to get Congress to start working together is to not radicalize the cabinet, which he's done a good job of so far with his appointees. But getting back to your question, the reason I don't think it's related is this takes time. At least everything I've read about, like, these antitrust suits, they don't just, somebody doesn't just get a wild hair up their ass and then file this and we all read about it. What I remember from years ago was the tax implications being, what kind of got things started, got the EU in particular, like, super pissed off, is they were realizing that Google, Apple, I don't know if that's back to, like, what connects these and what doesn't, whether Amazon folds into this or Facebook, but that they were avoiding a lot of US tax, which of course upset the US as well. But somewhere inside of that, and I'm not going to pretend like I know more than I don't do, but it seemed like the EU was not happy with that relationship or that situation either, and that's what got them going, I guess, on, we need better regulation, better laws, related to these companies, whether it's tax or whether it's consumer. They're using their power, their leverage to cut all sorts of corners and ultimately, of course, squash the competition. So I could be completely off on that, but I'm pretty confident that this new legislation is not why we're seeing these, because the other part of this is some of them are more stateside, right? But as I've been telling you, a lot of this is pressure coming from the EU, which couldn't have predicted, and almost, I would say, wouldn't care whether Trump had stayed in office or whether Biden replaced him.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. It also seems like it would take a long time to get this stuff together, right? So you couldn't really time it to be done as soon as you change over. So then, do you think it's just like a boiling point? Because I feel like this could have been done. I mean, what's it been, like 20 years since Microsoft was really going through the ringer on this? So why? I guess that's the question. Why now? What is special about now? Because Instagram and WhatsApp for the Facebook situation, that they've had those for years now.
Yeah, I do think that the politics, like what happened last election, it may have, like, accelerated some things, where it's like the outrage with Cambridge Analytica and all the questions about I guess Facebook and what they did or didn't do related to fake news and the data that they were harboring, like, the influence of like, this is going to sound all like Oliver Stone, but like Russia, as well as like the email hacks, like on Clinton leading up to, I really believe that that really freaked people out on both sides, where it's like, wow, there's so much influence and persuasion, same thing, that these giant companies have over us. And sometimes it's, you can point to the data, and other times it's just the platform itself. It's like the mechanism, of the content, and, how quickly it can travel and all this other stuff. So, I think that got people worked up. What I've been seeing more, and this article I was going to mention to you yesterday in the New York Times, is about this lady, Dinah Srinvasan.
Nailed it.
Apologies to Dina or Dinah. I don't even know how to pronounce her first name, but she had like a Yale law degree and this incredible CV. She decided not to pursue law and go into the ad tech world, and was, I don't know, senior leader or something. I mean, it doesn't say exactly what her title was, with one of the largest digital agencies in the world. And she got, I mean, I don't consider like she's a malcontent or anything, but she definitely got disenfranchised with the whole thing, and decided that the thing just was flawed, like that the deck was heavily stacked against anybody that was trying to enter any of these spaces that Google and Facebook, you could just say FANG, I guess, have ownership of. And so she just pivoted and started doing a bunch of research and writing, memos and papers that people said she wasn't even equipped to do, but she, super smart, apparently got the attention of some pretty big players. And they're not crediting her with like this whole rash or trend or whatever we want to call it, but they were saying she is an example of what's causing this, which is to say the insiders that are either exiled or made the choice themselves. So in other words, it's not as much about the outrage of the consumer at large, the consumers at large. It's not me and you saying, hey, this is bullshit, that, Google's the only search engine that we can use. It's actually a lot of insiders that, are saying, hey, there's more wrong, or there's more wrong than you guys know. And nobody's going to put a stop to this if we don't, type, I guess, crusade, if you will. And so she was very effective in drawing attention. And now she's kind of this acclaimed, I'll send the article to you, but she's this like acclaimed antitrust, I think, lawyer, or again, forget what how they're like what her title is. But so yeah, that's my answer to you. Like, what's causing this? Where's it, where's it all coming from? Then you have like The Social Dilemma, right? I think you saw that, but that was on Netflix, and that's the documentary about this very topic, really. It's less seemingly about the antitrust, like competitively. It's more just telling you how much data they have and how they're using it, and how, I guess, ethically, like, there's a lot of wrongdoing. And that's just perpetuating, I think, the public's eye is on this right now. And that then draws in the attention, frankly, of some of the people that want to make their own name for themselves, as well as, I think, legitimate like do-gooders who are like, enough's enough. So I'm trying to like paint the perfect storm of like what's causing this.
I feel like I gotta make a joke. First of all, good doers, evil doers. One day you'll bring up the evil doers comment. Secondly, Oliver Stone, was that a JFK reference or just his movies at large?
His movies at large. He thinks everything's a conspiracy. Yeah. So that was the reference.
Yeah. All right. Well, I tend to like his films. I actually was just redoing Wall Street just the other day, which I feel like it holds up really well. like Wall Street.
It's amazing.
2020 release, and I'd be like, oh yeah, totally. So
it's amazing. The follow-up was not good. It wasn't terrible, but it was not good. So, it's just one of those deals where like a super famous, incredibly, successful director I think is like super bored and was just like, yeah, it's been 30 years since I, won an Academy Award for this movie. I'm going to do part 2 now.
Yeah.
And wasn't a good idea.
I feel like that the follow-up, what the first time I saw it, I was disappointed, but when I watched it a second time, I was like, all right, that was better than I thought. I just think I'd built it up in my head so much. It's kind of like the Jurassic Park follow-ups. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, well, this garbage like ruins Jurassic Park for me. But then when I go back and I'm like, I just need a popcorn movie for like Friday night. Now I'm like, all right, it serves its purpose. So I think it's anytime you make a masterpiece, whether it's Jurassic Park or Wall Street, I feel like the follow up you're kind of hosed on. Like you've got to just lean into it and be like, this is just gonna be for fun now.
Totally. Yeah, I don't think anybody does, except of course the experts. But what was Da Vinci's like follow up to the Mona Lisa? It's like nobody remembers that painting.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you look at it that way and you just lower the bar significantly and probably have a beverage or two, at least for me, then I could get through it a little bit easier on those sequels.
Yeah. Well, on the to your point, like I think it's got to be something more at play than consumers, right? Because I think you were asking on a prior podcast, like, is this best for consumers? Having Instagram and Facebook together, do you think it's a better experience or worse? And I feel like in many ways it's a better experience for consumers having those two connected. I do agree that we like the Snapchats and the TikToks have helped like improve now Instagram and Facebook, like that competition's good, right? But this might have us start to roll into Google a little bit, but sticking on Facebook for a minute, like the WhatsApp thing, like I almost view WhatsApp as it's almost like how Alphabet has like Google and then they have their other projects, right? I kind of view WhatsApp as that way when it comes to Facebook. Now, I know in like in Asia, WhatsApp is way more popular than here in the States. And so maybe it's more like seen as like another competition, but in a way I feel like it's almost a good thing Facebook has WhatsApp because it's a way for them to continue to diversify, unless we're saying that it's a bad thing for companies to diversify. How do you take it? Do you think it's really just bad ultimately? If you win at more than one thing, if you've diversified, that makes you even more liable for this?
Well, apparently that's the same question I have. Like, are we looking at this more, what drives these? Is it more consumer driven, which is what you were just saying? It doesn't seem like it is. Or is it more business driven, which is to say there's other businesses that, feel like they genuinely can't compete. Like there's no opportunity to enter, these spaces because of these companies. And I don't see that. Like the way I view it is like, yes, they're getting swallowed up, but it doesn't mean like that's their own choice, most of the time. Like we've gotten to know that well enough by now. And it's like, so somebody starts their own search engine, starts to gain some traction, you don't have to sell out to Google. It's just, it makes sense. And then if Google wants to take a piece of your IP and turn that into something in their alphabet where it's like, hey, we're going to diversify because we really liked, this company and where you guys were headed. Why is that such a bad thing? Because whoever started that company probably did just fine and consumers aren't noticing the difference, right? And all we hear about, I'm going to kind of jump quickly to the business side of this, but in our industry, we constantly hear complaints about all the different platforms that they have to jump in and out of. So what does that tell you they're really looking for? Consolidation. They literally don't want, it doesn't make them feel better, doesn't make their lives any better if there's 80 different CRMs, so as much as they bitch about, and when I say they, we do too, but like RealPage, it's like, well, RealPage is effectively like the Google or Facebook in our industry, right? And they are swallowing up all these companies, but what would it look like if they didn't? And then they sometimes they hold on to like a Lease Labs brand, right, and let them somewhat operate autonomously, and sometimes they don't. But that's what is the most interesting thing here. Like, who's really behind? What's the motivation of these suits? Because if I'm a business owner, doesn't bother me. If I'm on the the end user consumer, I rather work with less platforms, not more. And I'd rather have my data. I mean, shit. Even for some reason, I'm being pretty liberal with my curse words today.
That's
But
only two. We're so good.
I think I'm at
Unless
3, but okay.
his son Mitch listening, and now you owe $2. So
Okay. All right. 2 in the tip, the whatever curse jar.
yeah.
Um, but my mom, I was just talking to her about, that chest pain I was mentioning to you. And I was like, I don't want to jack with the primary. I just need to find a specialist because
Mm.
I hate going to the doctor, and I just want to trust, the answer that I get back is it. And she was like, sweetie, that's just for you, man. David always
Thank
laughs at my
thank you.
impersonations of females. They're all the same, right? You've picked up on that, like whether it's my wife or my mom.
Yeah.
But but anyways, she was like, the reason that you go to the primary care is you want all your data with one person. So it's easier than, like, if the specialist is going to look at you, that he doesn't then have to corral and potentially miss, information, like super important information from some other like clinic that you went to, or some other, whatever physician, right? So like that's the reason that we, as consumers or whatever, like patients, should try to keep things consolidated. So I'll stop there. I'm just saying, time and again, like so many examples where it seems like that's what we want. So why is this happening? I'll
Yeah.
pose the question back to you.
Well, first of all, I almost want to stand up, even though I dog on Facebook a lot. I want to stand up for them for a second, because if I was running Facebook, or if we were running Facebook, right? They bought Instagram for $1 billion back in, what was it, 2012? And at the time, Instagram had like 12 employees. At the time, everyone thought Facebook was crazy. They're like, "What are you talking about? You're going to pay $1 billion for 12 employees? This is insane." At the time, Twitter had been trying to buy Instagram as well, and I didn't pre-research. This is just my brain. I feel like Twitter was offering like 200 million or something for Facebook, and Twitter and Facebook was like, well, maybe, and then Facebook, or sorry, for Instagram, Facebook gives you 5x that. You're like, well, hell, I'm going to jump on that, and everybody thought they were insane at the time. So now to go back 8 years later, and like, if it's really, it's like it was approved back then for this purchase to happen. But now it's like we want to reverse it. And that's actually what the Facebook lawyer said, is like the government now wants a do-over. And the same thing for WhatsApp that they bought in 2014. And I think that's where I'd be the most upset if I'm them. I'm like, you already approved this, and I'm not like, I overpaid at the time. Everyone was upset at this. And now you say it's a problem that I have it. And it's almost like, it's that when it comes to capitalism, it's like you're allowed to be successful until you're too successful, in a way, right? Because it would still be seen as like anti-competitive, is like using your mass. That's what this is really about. Not that you get too big unless you start being anti-competitive with it, because you snap up everybody. But they haven't bought TikTok. They didn't buy Snap. Like, there's other competitors out there that they're not buying. Musically is what Musically got bought and turned into TikTok. It's like they could have bought that, and they didn't do it. So on their defense, I'm like, this is, this should be okay, right? Now on the bad side, it's all the other stuff that they're doing, like how they're really like all the election stuff you talked about, the misinformation stuff, and how they're dragging their feet. That, the content, like quality, like curation, and like the offensiveness that happens. Like YouTube is doing a far better job of that than Facebook is, and Facebook is way bigger than YouTube, right? So that's my quick defense of them, and why it's happening. I think it's because we can't get them some other way. So let's go ahead and get it this way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like when consumers get really worked up, is when it's about price. It's like, this is directly affecting, how much I'm paying for a specific service or product. And, that when you look at Amazon, I think most people you can't make that argument, right? So that antitrust just came in November, I guess, from the EU. But it's like, am I spending more on products, now that Amazon has monopolized e-commerce, or less? And I typically spend less on Amazon than I do if I go into a store and buy the same product. not to turn this into some sort of brick and mortar versus e-commerce, but you get what I'm saying. It's like, then if with cable, it's like if Time Warner, and Comcast, merge, or AT&T, like when you look at telecom, am I paying more now for my mobile plan or for, my phone, whatever? That's understandable, where it's like, hey, because of all these acquisitions now, the consumer's really left stuck, like screwed. But when it comes to things like data, that's harder to show, I feel like, to say, here's the consequences to the end user. What they're still, and I'm not saying it's wrong, pointing to is, and I still feel is a little bit of fear mongering, is, oh, they have your data. Like they can control our minds now, like, free thought or whatever has been removed. And there's the side where you look at what's happened on the right politically, and you could say, hey, there is evidence of that. Like, look how radical things have gotten. And a lot of people do point to the media, then that points to the data, then that points to those publishers and those platforms. So you could, bring it back to that. But I also am like, screw the person that can't think for themselves. It's like, you have to be able to make your own decisions, and be less vulnerable, I guess, to big tech.
Yeah. Well, what would you do then if you were in charge of Facebook now? And I can give you mine first, and then you can go. But it just strikes me like the issue is, well, anti-competitive, and right now I'm not. I mean, obviously we haven't seen the documents like saying how they're anti-competitive, except that it just says that they are trying to have a monopoly, which, okay, but I just disagree with it as it's stated right now. So if I'm Facebook and I'm like, well, how could I be, what would make me anti-competitive? I'll tell you something that was kind of anti-competitive. Facebook used to have an open, what they called social graph. And so what that meant is that you could actually API into Facebook and like leverage it, like everyone's connections there to improve your product. Right. So it's like if I wanted to build an app and then like distribute it, I could log in the Facebook social graph, and then I could quickly connect with all of your friends and email them or whatever. But they shut that off. Like, I forget how long ago, it was like 5 or 6 years ago, where you could no longer use the social graph. And at the time, that's how like Instagram got a lot of its stuff up. They used the social graph. It's like, great, you're going to post pictures on ours, but you can use the social graph to quickly share it to your friends on Facebook. Yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of examples of companies that started to build themselves off of that. And that's like Zynga. You remember Zynga, the game company? Like it used the social graph and some other thing. So if I'm Facebook, I just reopen the social graph API. I allow people to start like, yeah, you can use our network as a distribution channel. You can use our network to like quickly like build your own like extra social media tools on top of this. And that's kind of like what I feel like WhatsApp is. And I don't think you're super into WhatsApp, but WhatsApp basically acts as like an operating system where you can build apps within WhatsApp. And that's one reason it spread so fast in China, because the phones are so locked down. WhatsApp made it possible for them to build apps faster and distribute it quickly. So I know this would hurt Facebook's business long term as they see it, because now you don't have to pay for ads to distribute your stuff if someone's hacking the social graph to get better distribution. But I feel like that's a small price to pay to hold on to Instagram, WhatsApp, and basically keep your company intact as you want. So I say open the social graph, allow anybody to hit it however they want, leverage it however they want. And now you become kind of like Windows, where you're an actual platform. People can build apps on top of you, but they need you to exist as you exist. And then if the FTC ever tried to shut down Facebook, you'd have all of these other entrepreneurs that had built their stuff off of Facebook that said, whoa, 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 you can't break that up, because now I won't be able to run my business. So anyways, that's what I would do if I'm Facebook.
Yeah, well, not knowing what the the implications. I mean, when you say a small price to pay, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. And that would determine for me whether I'd go down that path or not. I was going to say I'd buy TikTok, but just
how's that going to help you?
It's not just giving the finger back to, but what was I going to say? I mean, first I would, just fight the suit. I mean, I think that, again, you and I have never, I think, stood up for Facebook, and, but I don't get this. I really don't. I don't think several years after sales happen, that is a good message for entrepreneurs and, industry and capitalism at large. So I haven't seen as many opinions, I guess, op-eds or anything about that. But if I did have to make some compromises, I think that is, a good solution. I was going to mention that, like, they also made it really difficult, as far as inventory, right? Like, that they had walled up, their garden, and it's like, you can work through all these other exchanges, but you're not going to get at Facebook. But I also kind of respect that. It's like, if I had a store, and I was really successful, why would I mean, how would I feel if I was forced to allow other people, I guess, to sell my products and basically dilute the, either the experience or the exclusivity that so many businesses, are frankly told, that's one of the things that you should shoot for. You and I always are talking about, like, trying to build a moat and, like, protect ourselves. And so it's got to be, kind of a, well, mixed feeling, right? It's like you've succeeded so much now that, there is legislation pointed your way, to try and, kind of dilute the moat or, the monopoly that you formed.
Yeah, I
But
think
it just
that's
seems messed up to me.
yeah, I think that's the problem. Everyone always associates monopolies as being illegal, but monopolies aren't illegal. It's the anti-competitive behavior that's illegal, right? And it's bringing it slightly to our industry for a second. It's like, as you said, RealPage earlier, it's like all of these CRMs and lead management systems that try to keep the data in that walled garden. I feel like that's anti-competitive, like not opening up or letting other people grab your data or APIs, or the customers own it, like export it easily. Like that to me is like, that's anti-competitive. But it doesn't matter how big you are, as long as you allowed people to have access. It kind of goes back to Microsoft, right? Like Windows is still probably 90% of the operating systems, yet anybody can make software and distribute it, so it's okay. Well, sort of parlaying that into Google and a little bit Amazon. So Amazon, I would say, even though they haven't been hit with a US suit yet, you said EU, I feel like they are anti-competitive. I mean, like the way that it's like, put your stuff on our platform and sell it. Oh, and then as soon as we see that it takes off, we're going to knock it off and make our own version and sell it. And we'll rank ours higher because it's Amazon choice, right? Because it's Amazon's product. And like, oh, if you want to start now ranking at the top of the rankings, we're gonna charge you to do that. Yeah, I mean, that to me, and that has some parallels to, I think, the Google suit. But to me, I feel like Amazon is anti-competitive. Now, I wouldn't want to break up, when they say anti-competitive, they talk about breaking up Amazon into like AWS versus like Amazon Commerce. But it's like the e-commerce portion is where I feel they're anti-competitive. And how do you break that up? Because you're not going to say, we're going to break out books versus electronics. I mean, I don't think anybody's suggesting that. And that would be a very bad user experience at that point.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, again, and maybe it's just because I know more than the average Joe about how that stuff works, that I don't fall victim to that, where it's like, oh, that's a rip-off Amazon product, and they've shown themselves higher in the results, so therefore, they're going to get more of my business. I just don't, and if it bothered me that much, then I would try to shop somewhere else or shop directly. That's where the consumer, has a role to play here, right? And that's when it's interesting, when you have class action suits, or, when, people come together collectively saying this is wrong. I think that always, I'll say, has more power than when it, is just like HUD with Facebook. When it's coming from the masses. But that's like, we've said it several times. And funny enough, I read another article that I meant to show you when you and I were asking, is anybody going to go after Amazon? And they were pointing to the percentages, albeit small, are starting to eat into Amazon's share a little bit. And they are coming from exactly who you and I speculate, which is Walmart. Now I can't remember the 2 or 3 other kind of big retailers that seem to be getting more and more serious about this, but nobody's offering an alternative for consumers, right? And I guess that's where they're saying, well, that's not a coincidence. Amazon's doing that deliberately.
Yeah. What's funny though about it too is like the difference with Amazon versus some of these other companies is that Amazon has can hire people, right? Or continues to hire people. Like in many ways they're more efficient. right, than I guess you would say brick and mortar stores are. But it's not like software where it's just like copy paste, new code, don't need a new human. Yeah, I mean, so they're still creating a lot of jobs. So I feel like Amazon's argument could be that like, well, we're adding a lot of jobs. So for example, Reid, I wanted to make sure I had my number right. But do you know how many employees Amazon has?
20,000.
Uh, yeah, almost 1.2 million.
That's 1.2 million.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
And they've hired over 250,000 this year alone. So they're,
Wow.
I mean, they're just hiring crazy amounts of people. So if I'm a lawmaker and now the risk is like if I let them keep doing this, like they're going to get so damn big. I like the train's left the station. I can't do anything now because having over 1 million employees and they hired a quarter of that this year. Like, how do you eventually stop that train? It's just so much power.
And where is the 250,000? Like, is there a pie chart of like, which parts of Amazon they're being hired into? Like, is this all a result of COVID, like the pandemic, and they just can't keep up with all the e-commerce?
Yeah, I can't wait to look that up. That's an awesome thing. Like, is it delivery? Is it? I mean, I imagine it's got to be a lot of warehouse workers and stuff. I'm sure it's some of the other businesses they're getting into too, though. Like, we talked about healthcare and some other things, but not. It doesn't seem like as heavy as Amazon from an e-commerce standpoint, right? With COVID and everybody, all these brick and mortar shutting down and people buying more stuff online, you would just imagine most of it has to be the logistics side of things.
Yeah. Well, speaking again of anti-competitive, didn't they divorce themselves from FedEx? So
they're
now,
weaning
or
off.
UPS.
They're weaning off of
Yeah.
their other logistics partners.
Right. So that's going to require them to obviously do that much more hiring.
Yeah, here you go. Your favorite Washington Post. They had even better numbers than me. They say they hired 400,000 employees in 2020, and this is as of October. They added 250,000 people just in the just in the 3 months prior to October. I mean, that's so many people.
It's insane. But I don't know how that couldn't be tied to them trying to, I guess, exit those relationships, with some of their third party delivery agreements, and then what's happened with everything gone remote. You have a lot of people. Well, I don't even need to say it. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, will this stick? Like that'll be interesting. Will we be reading just the opposite next year? Or in 2022, where it's like Amazon announces massive layoffs because things go back to normal and, the volume that they were seeing drops. Like, is this a temporary thing or is this something that we expect them to? Because they didn't do that last year, right? I mean, I don't know, but it's like, how can you not connect the dots here? Like, if they made that many hires just this year versus what they did in 2019.
Yeah, in 19, I think when I saw the number, they had like 700,000. So it's been a lot of growth this year. But for comparison, it says Walmart has 2.2 million people. So I guess like 1.2 million is a lot, but it's not quite Walmart size yet. And Walmart would be last hit in my thought versus like it's more of you're taking probably from small businesses would be my thought as you crowd them out. And then if I remember that number in this article, but in a prior article we had read with Amazon fulfillment, it was like 7%. Previously, 7% of packages were being delivered by Amazon, but I think they're trying to reverse that and make it more of like all but 7% being delivered by Amazon. Because like where I live up here, there's not Amazon delivery yet. We're just too far out, so it's still the post office that does it. Yeah.
You just went Picasso on me for a second.
Okay.
That'll be the entertaining part of the video element. You had 3 ears and like, your hair was like on top of your hair. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I was going to say, does that number include Whole Foods and like, I mean, that's all in, right? Like, or I wonder if that is
I think
split
that's
off.
Yeah, I think it's all in since Whole Foods is part of the same company, just a smaller company underneath.
Yeah, so the 700,000, like, what I'm getting at is like how much of this is like hiring up versus acquisitions, you know, as we do talk about all these kind of, I don't know, behind the curtain, you know, deals that are done that we don't even know about. It's like, how did they end up with another 200,000 employees? It's like, well, they just bought another company.
Yeah, I didn't take it that way. I think this is all about the hiring this year because Whole Foods was before, and I haven't heard of major acquisitions folding in this year. But all
Yeah.
I'm getting to is like back to Amazon. Like I think when they're talking about breaking it up, it's breaking up the e-commerce versus AWS. And to me, it seems like why break that up? Now, if it does get broken up, if memory serves me right, like when the telecos were or telcos were broken up, their stock actually improved afterwards. So it's not like these companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google, if they get broken up, that it's like, you know, let's cry them a river or anything. It's like their value, their immediate value is probably going to increase, right? Just from
Mm-hmm.
history's sake.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I would just say, like, do you have anything different on Amazon than what I do regarding like, I don't see the point about breaking up AWS. I just see a point about like they almost need regulation to make sure they're not using their platform to be anti-competitive.
Right. No, I don't disagree with that. You know, I just, this is I mean, I already said it, but I just think the consumer has a role to play here. Like I can't stand, and this isn't going to sound very, I'll say democratic or liberal of me, but I don't like it when people play the victim. And that's what gets at me with some of this stuff. But there's a reality to a good portion of it. So I'm not like leaning too hard to one side here. I'm just saying, like, when it comes to does somebody need to be like checking or supervising like the way that they, and I think they probably do, David. I'm just like, I can see through that. I feel like it's pretty obvious. Like, at what point, I mean, who doesn't know that there's ads on Google now? You know, it's like consumer beware. Like, we're in a tech industry, you have to start to know how these things work, and then you can avoid, I guess, falling victim or becoming another sheep, like, or taken advantage of.
Well, that's
Doesn't change what you talked about though with other industries. So I'm still kind of dwelling too much probably on the consumer perspective
well,
here.
I think there is some responsibility as a consumer, but it's still, um, I think it's more about what you can and can't do, right? Though, like if Amazon's relieving so much pain that it's just easier to shop on there and it's less expensive, and they build themselves on the backs of other independent sellers that like show Amazon the way, and then Amazon goes and sources their own product, and then they crowd them out because Amazon, well, they already have the data to like they can look at the data and then crowd them out. That's what I feel like is anti-competitive. The consumer side of things, it's still, yeah, I agree that the consumer should know better, or you would hope the consumer could know better and vote for their dollar. Do I want the Amazon version of this or do I want someone else's version? It's kind of the whole white label thing that happens with green beans in grocery stores or whatever. But at least in grocery stores, you still have typically the house labels look more garbagey and right, like they don't have great branding or whatever. Um, Amazon has gone a little bit better than the traditional white label of green beans, and Amazon can decide that it's placed first on the page or the first 10 on the page versus like, all right, I'm just going to nuke that competitor down in the search rankings, right? You can't I mean, I guess theoretically in a store you could nuke your competitor off the shelf, but yeah, it doesn't seem as egregious as online.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I look at some of those again, still consumer, but it's like, well, now I have the option of a quality generic product, which sounds like a contradiction, or I can continue to buy the brand that, you know, originally like piqued my interest or engaged me, like with that salsa, you know, and I'm empowered, right? As a consumer, is that a bad thing? I now have a more affordable option that if I'm not going to be a snob about my salsa, I can eat Whole Foods
Well,
salsa.
I wonder if that's
You know, what's
different.
worrisome though, go ahead.
Oh, well, your salsa is a great example because salsa, your salsa is a repeat purchase, right? You're getting it all the time, versus like the garbage can I buy on Amazon. It's like I don't know, lifty lid garbage cans or something over Amazon. I know Amazon, so it's like, all right, my brand affinity with Amazon is there's got to be some quality control there, so I'm going to believe that over lifty lid, right? And so I think that's more the issue is these infrequent purchases.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point. Yeah, I mean, there has to be some now I'm coming back to your side, I guess, but there does have to be some supervision in how they're using their platform. Because if it was that egregious where it's like, we're just going to reverse engineer every trending product and then, stand it up on ourselves and then, bury you guys in the results, then yeah, that seems like an easy one as far as anti-competitive.
Well, then stick on the Google train for a second, because I think this is what you were saying the other day, and you just alluded to it now. But on Google, do you believe Google should be broken up? If so, how would you do it? Because as you were saying, everyone should know that there's ads on Google at this point.
Yeah, I don't personally need to see another search engine or have multiple search engines. This is just one piece, so I guess that's the important part here. And frankly, I'm not as versed as I'm sure you are at breaking out the alphabet, like all the companies inside of that. But it doesn't seem like the other outside of their advertising, like that they've had tremendous success, or it's something that needs to be broken up. And if I'm trying to compare it to Facebook, it's like, have they made as noteworthy of acquisitions? I guess YouTube, so I can answer that myself. But I was just thinking as far as WhatsApp and Instagram.
Besides,
and there are a lot of other video platforms. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Omniture and DoubleClick or whatever, like some of these other ones that they bought, right? Like that's what you're saying about the ad platforms or where they've done it.
I was thinking more consumer driven, which is where I'd compare, YouTube to like an Instagram or a WhatsApp. But no, I don't. I mean, you and I, funny enough, were there at the beginning, like meaning we were selling like 60 different search engines or something, and it was frustrating, frankly, on my side or your side to go to market with that, and then it was frustrating for people, to buy that, and then frustrating for people to use it that way. So when it comes to Google specifically, like I'm not looking to see that broken up. I don't even know what that would look like from a consumer's perspective. I'm still speaking, as a consumer, not, I guess the other businesses, and maybe that's the more interesting part of this conversation.
Yeah, well, I think the argument against them right now is that since they're paying for the default position on Apple, then it makes them anti-competitive because they're using their dollars to be above Apple as the default search engine on iPhone. But I feel like that's the wrong argument to take. I think you're leaning the correct direction probably with the ad buys, ad networks, right? That you basically have to be in the Google stack, as a business to compete. And then on search, I agree with you. It's like they provide a great product. My biggest complaint on search is, I think this actually is mentioned in the FTC lawsuit, but is about the vertical searches like Yelp and Kayak, the Yelp and Kayak complaint, right? Like, so as they get into hotels, like now you're cannibalizing those other search engines. As the consumer though, if Google was so great, I wouldn't go to those other search engines, and that's better for me. But the problem is when they're like nerfing the results, like stealing Yelp reviews and putting them straight on the Google search page. It's kind of the whole publisher argument about giving someone Google's a question and you just take the answer and give it to the consumer instead of like linking to the article that has it. So I think that's more of my issue is like, if you're building yourself on top of other search engines, as Google kind of is, then you should allow those other search engines a fair way to play.
Yeah, totally. And it wouldn't have hurt them. I mean, that was a good example you just offered up, or one of the things they were taking heat for, which was those questions, answers the questions, and then not linking back to them. I personally wouldn't want to necessarily go back, but I guess but I wouldn't want to be prevented from having the option. Still gets back to like, I think they have delivered, and that's why they're as big as they are, such a more efficient like experience for us as consumers. Facebook's done it in their own way, like as far as content and staying connected. So it's like, I'm not saying you can't have it both ways, but there is that element to me where it's like, how do you think this all happened? It's because it's what we wanted. They were solving a problem. They were, painkiller plus, the daily vitamin, as we like to say, like those are the products that they built. And now we're trying to, as you said, like penalize them for becoming as successful as they have. But it's not that simple. I mean, truly, like I think you've articulated some great examples, like concerns that we all should have, like as far as how they're, how they are showing some anti-competitive trends. But does that mean that we should go as far as breaking up these companies, I guess, is where I not sure I'm sold yet. Like, because of this, isn't there something in between? And probably that is what will happen when you see these big antitrust suits against companies of this size. A lot of it is, I don't want to call it posturing, but it's like you start with, hey, we're threatening to like dismantle your whole freaking, like company, to, okay, we'll meet in the middle. The public will be happy. The legislators will be happy. You conceded X, Y, and Z, which is, you were offering up the idea of like the social graph being open back up. So that's probably where this will go. I think the plausibility of them actually like breaking up a Facebook or an Amazon or Google is pretty small, but time will tell.
Well, sticking on Google for a second, if I was to break them up, it'd be more like there has to be some sort of controls in place so you can't squash the other search engines. So, applied to this industry would be the ILS, right? Like if they all of a sudden got involved in the apartment search business, now you may be stealing listings from apartments.com and Apartment Guide or whatever, right? So that would be one concern. So if I was in the hotel industry, but as it sits today, I feel like I'm more concerned with Android and like the App Store on Android. So you have to use, just like Apple, you have to use the Apple Store, you have to use the Android Store, and they take a 30% cut. And to me, like 30% is an egregious business model since you don't allow other app stores to really exist on your platform. Like if you want to add in the Amazon Android store, you have to like basically almost like root your phone and like, then you void warranty, right? And so it's like, so to use another store that may pay the app developer a better split, I have to like break the warranty on my phone, and now you won't say it's okay anymore. So to me, that I would focus on that, or maybe something with Chrome, or something with the ad networks and how it's basically monopolized there, but not on the search on its face. So if I'm Google and I want to do something, I feel like back to the social graph idea. If I want to get into apartments, I just need to work better with apartments.com or CoStar or something to provide how do I take the CoStar experience and put it inside of the search results so people can still kind of get the best results easiest without having to jump through other hoops? I feel like that kind of the equivalent of the social graph, right? So then it's almost like you're back to operating system. It's like if you're Windows, you can use Microsoft Excel if you want, or you can use some other spreadsheet program that you prefer, but any of them will work. And so if Google starts to think of itself more like an operating system, which obviously it has for Chrome and Android, but how could it turn the search results page into something like that so that other businesses can inject themselves into the page effectively, and then Google can still provide a great user experience because they can kind of sit on top of it all and make sure it works well together.
Well, lots of good thoughts there. The very last piece is what I question. It's not because I can't open my mind to that, but I would be curious to see what that looks like, because so much of Google's success is built on the experience that they have, the user experience they have. So will they be able to start working with other, search, I guess, directories, results like a CoStar and make that feel right for us as the consumer?
Yeah,
but I like where you're headed with it.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure how that does or doesn't work. I'm just saying, like, if you're trying to open it up, if you're Google and you forecast 20 years in the future, it would be frustrating if, as a consumer, I have to go to Yelp or I have to go to apartments.com. I'd rather, as you said, have one search bar. So if Google is almost barred from going forward in developing an apartment search option, what choice is there besides trying to find some way to work together? Otherwise, what you have is like somebody else is going to come along and it's going to be like, now we're your one search bar and we search both Google and apartments.com for you. It basically starts to aggregate these other search engines. And so now it's almost like, as you know, Reid, like the programmatic stack and how you have like 16 different layers of companies involved in selling an ad. I feel like that's what it becomes if you don't start to work together. And if you force Google to say like, well, you can only search websites, but you can't search like other search engines.
Totally. Yep.
All right. Well, anything else on this? I don't know, this whole thread about antitrust. I mean, overall, it sounds like, if I'm just for project or whatever, trying to make this all cohesive. You and I are like, maybe something should be done, but we don't think any of them chose the right way to get it done.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more that's going to come out, obviously about all these different suits that, we should obviously just stay on top of and probably serve for some good podcasts down the road. I'm still trying to get in my head what's at the root of it, where I kind of started, just the insiders, and exiles or whatever, like suddenly having a guilty conscience almost like all at once. So it's like this collective, grounds up, like type movement that's happening from folks that were in those positions before. And so, when I did watch The Social Dilemma, and again, not anything earth shattering for me, but why is it that they so bothered, and now they're coming out speaking about it and helping develop or provide the research. But I guess it is because there's more that, there's more to it than we realize. And I think you highlighted actually some really good examples of that. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to keep an eye on. We didn't get to, and I don't want to try to rise this up here at the end, but what's happened with CoStar and RentPath, and what's at the root of that. So maybe it would be best for us as we speak through these, you were kind of going straight at Facebook, but take them one at a time and really spend a little bit more time diving into what we're reading, and see if we can kind of put the pieces together a little bit better.
Cool. Well, I guess that's a nice teaser to leave it on, but we'll have to come back and do one on the CoStar RentPath debacle.
Totally.
All right, let's get out of here.
All right.